Hi, I'm Dustin Abbott, and I'm here today to give you my standard review of the new Sony a7C camera. And this, of course, C standing for compact, it is Sony's new idea to take basically the internals of the Sony a7 III full-frame camera and to put them into a camera body that is roughly the size of an a6600 APS-C camera. And so we've got a shift from the, the standard profile of Sony's full-frame cameras, with the middle stack with the viewfinder, to more of a rangefinder design with the viewfinder over to the far left. And so the byproduct of that is that we have a camera that is really compact, and it weighs in at about 509 grams. So it's only 6 grams heavier than the a6600, and it's a full 150 or so grams less than the a7 III. And of course has considerably less volume, particularly in terms of the height, and then at the depth of the grip there as well. And so if your idea of mirrorless was small and light, and you've been disappointed by the trend of, both cameras and, of course, lenses getting larger, then I think that Sony has developed an upgrade path for you, particularly if you're coming from mirrorless and or from APS-C mirrorless, and you're interested in staying with something that's familiar but moving up to the improved quality and performance you can get from a full-frame camera, then the a7C might just be a great option for you. Now, if you want more information, you're seriously considering this, I recommend that you take a look at the definitive review, where I really break down everything in detail. And in this particular review, I'm just going to kind of give you the highlights and the things that stood out to me over the course of my review period. And so, it'll be a little quicker and to the point, hopefully, for if that is your preference. And if that is, you're in the right place. So as noted, that transition to a smaller body is facilitated by the fact that we have a fully articulating screen now that is inherited from the A7S Mark III. And so byproduct of that is, of course, you have a lot more flexibility for content creation, which is kind of the way that they are, marketing this particular camera. And so everything from, vlogging to, if you're doing a section like I'm doing right now, to where you could have some front monitoring that helps out a lot. Unfortunately, what isn't upgraded here is the touch capability of this particular screen. And so while you can, select a focus point and or move it around with your eye up to the viewfinder, you really don't have any options for navigation through touch at all. And to further complicate that, in the process of going to the more compact design, we have lost the joystick. And so you are basically left navigating through the rear, wheel/rocker position. That is your basically only navigation aid in either the full menu or the fast menu. And so I really wish, I think that they could have done themselves a huge favor here in improving the ergonomics, because there are a number of things that are lost by just giving us a fully functional touchscreen like we have on, say, a Canon camera, and that I think would have helped a whole lot. Because as noted, it's not just the loss of the joystick. There's also, like on the A6000 series, there's not a front wheel dial here, so we have lost that. What we have also lost is the 3 custom buttons that are typically on the, say the a7 III, for example. We've also got the exposure lock button that is missing. So that's a total of 4 customizable buttons that have been lost here. And so, the one, I would say, biggest downside here is that we really have lost a lot of the ability to customize the camera, to program in shortcuts that I think a lot of people really enjoy, having that aspect of a Sony camera. And so, some of that has been lost. What we have seen, however, is a move to, on the top plate, we have got the record button for video that is placed there in a nice prominent position, much easier to access. And so that itself is a positive. So you're going to have to control, shutter speed and or aperture through the 2 rear wheels as opposed to anything on the front. There still is the mode dial and exposure compensation. Those are there. And some of the other buttons in the back are fairly familiar. Now, the other thing that moving to this, articulating screen is that it would require a redesign here on the side. I actually think Sony's done a really good job with that. And so we've basically retained most everything that the a7 III had, but just organized in a different fashion. Unfortunately, we do have a door that takes the SD card on the side here, as opposed to like the A6000 series where it's dumped down in the battery compartment, which I despise because a lot of times I have a quick release plate on there or something, and a lot of times it'll impede that door, so you've got to take things apart, you've got to lay the camera down, all of that to get at it. And so I really love having that here. Now, downside is that we have one UHS-2 SD card slot instead of the 2 slots that were found in the A7 III. And so you're losing a little bit there. I know that that's a big deal for some people, less of a big deal for others. And so I don't love the ergonomics here compared, because I'm more familiar with the full frame series, and I have, owned and used some of the A6000 series. It's much less of a big deal if you're migrating from those, because it's going to be a much more familiar design. The actual grip here has a new texture on it, and it is smaller. It's basically just wide enough to fit, the larger battery pack that we have in the full frame cameras, and that is the NPFZ100, and so that gives you actually about 30 more rated shots in this application, about 740 I believe it's rated for, which is pretty good as far as mirrorless cameras go. Now, obviously, this camera, I think, is designed around those that, if you're buying this camera to pair it with something like the 200 to 600 millimeter lens, what's the point? But I think that if you're wanting to go smaller and lighter, this is going to be a great configuration. Up to and including, there is a brand new kit lens, which is the 28 to 60 millimeter f4 to 5.6. As you can see, it's a retractable zoom design, and so you actually have to extend it forward to use it, even at the 28 millimeter position. But when it's retracted, it is almost half the overall length of the previous kit, 28 to 70 millimeter, and it's a much better lens optically. And so I was actually really pleasantly surprised with the optics. I don't necessarily love the handling. It feels like a cheap kit lens. However, the optics are definitely a cut above what I have come to expect from them. If you want more information on the lens, I recommend that you check out my review of the 28 to 60 millimeter lens that you can find here. I believe that another really great series to pair with the A7C, which I shot with a lot, is Samyang Rokinon's Tiny series, 18 millimeter f2.8, the new 35 millimeter f1.8, 45 millimeter f1.8, 75 millimeter f1.8. All of these lenses are a really great pairing in terms of their weight. They're also a great pairing in terms of their optical performance, and I got some beautiful photos out of them. Autofocus works well, and so just a lot of good things going on there. So definitely, if you're interested in some good quality but relatively inexpensive and compact prime lenses, then check out that series. If you buy an A7C, I think it's a great pairing there as well. Now, we have inherited the focus system from the A7 III, which is a great thing because it inherited its focus system from the A9. So we've got the 693 phase detect supported by 425 contrast AF points, so they're hybrid AF. You have about 93% coverage of the sensor, and just really, really great performance. I really feel like Sony's focus tech is really maturing at this point, and I basically have zero negatives to report about the focus system. It was great in all kinds of environments. Eye tracking was fantastic. And even when it comes to tracking action, you've got a few advantages here. One of those is that we have inherited, the ongoing, maturation of the focus technology that has been updated somewhat through firmware, but here it's just, built in right from the, out of the box. And so it just feels like it all works just a little bit better. Also some updated focus algorithms that were developed for the A7S III that we have got included here. But beyond that, while it's still 10 frames per second, what we do have is the ability now to shoot those 10 frames per second in silent shutter mode as well, which you didn't have on the A7 III. We've also got the ability to have a little bit deeper a buffer, and so instead of 89 RAW files, you can get up to 115. Instead of 177 JPEGs, you can go up to 223. And so that extra bit obviously is going to be useful in some applications. And so good things there. Also inherited is the sensor from the A7 III, which is a 24 megapixel BSI backlit sensor. It's a great sensor. I mean, gives you really highly detailed images. And beyond that, it really is one of Sony's best performers when it comes to dynamic range and high ISO performance. You know, for example, here you can see a recovery of 4 stops of shadows, and it just recovers beautifully cleanly. I mean, I really can't see any kind of negatives associated with it. On the other end, you can recover up to 3 stops of highlights very cleanly, as you can see. It falls apart between 3 and 4 stops, but I've never yet seen a camera that is able to recover 4 stops of overexposure in the highlights. And so this is essentially as good as what I've seen. According to Sony, it's 15 stops of dynamic range, and you know, it certainly seems to be as good or a little bit better than basically anything else that I have tested. And so it's a really great sensor. I've always been impressed by how much detail are in the files. These days, 24 megapixels doesn't sound like a lot, but I think that most people will find it's enough resolution for just about every application. And I'm just impressed with the amount of detail that it's capable of producing as a part of that. Now, it also inherits basically the video performance of the A7 III, so a lot of good, a little bit negative, and the negative is primarily that the specs have not really improved in terms of codecs or frame rates. And so, you know, these days 4K 30 doesn't sound as impressive as it used to, and the fact that, you know, you're only going to get slow-mo. You can get up to 120 frames per second, but at 1080p. And so, you know, that's just not as impressive as what it once was. But again, it's matured nicely here. You've got the improved autofocus, the ability to front monitor. And there are some improvements. You've got S-Log2, S-Log3, ability to record HLG for high dynamic range. Good things there, obviously. The hot shoe is updated now to where you can get digital audio through, you know, some Sony mics. But beyond that, they've improved a few other areas to where now there is, like the A7S III, there's no limit on the recording length, and so no longer you have to cut off at 29:59. And so I've already recorded a number of like teaching sessions that are longer format, and it's been just such a relief to not worry about coming up against that, you know, kind of deadline, operating deadline. And so obviously really positive there. You also now have the ability to film vertically, if that's your thing. Also, it's designed with, you know, potential of using it for streaming, and you've got a new color overlay and a few other A7S III features that have been incorporated into the design. So while it isn't really advancing the ball in terms of the video formats, it is, again, it's a maturation of existing tech and making it just all work a little bit better. And it does work really, really well. I've been really pleased with performance for video. And so at the end of the day, I think that, you know, this really comes down to how important going compact is for you. If it's not a big deal for you, the A7 III really, you know, for right now, it actually costs $100 less, and I definitely prefer the ergonomics of that body. You know, you end up with 2 card slots, a much better grip, and then also the custom buttons and wheels, joysticks, some things that you're missing here. Now, of course, the A7 III does give you the articulating screen, which could be a really big deal depending on your application. If you're a content creator and thinking about it from a video perspective, you know, it may be more tempting there than just for stills. If you're wanting to use, you know, bigger lenses, you know, unless you're actually adding some grip on here, you've got a pretty small body for that, and the viewfinder is not quite as satisfying, frankly. And so, I mean, you know, there's give and take here. So in some ways, Sony has muddied the waters, but I think that if your priority is to go really compact, then it's not muddied. I think this is the best choice for you, and probably the best choice out there amongst full frame options. And for those of you that are, you know, have always kind of wanted to go full frame, but you don't want to pay massive amounts of money, and you don't want to go to a much larger camera, obviously this is going to be a perfect fit for you. I'm Dustin Abbott, and if you look in the description down below, there is linkage to my full text review, which, you know, can help you to kind of look at things at your leisure. There's also buying links there if you'd like to purchase one for yourself. Linkage to an image gallery where I've got photos not only from the kit lens, but a variety of other lenses there as well. And beyond that, there's a linkage to follow me on social media, to become a patron, or to sign up for my newsletter. And if you haven't already, please click that subscribe button right here on YouTube. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.